Okay.
Down the
Hi.
line.
I'm Jen Miller. I'm with Texas Tech University. Been there now 8 years, so I've been there for a while. Can answer pretty much any question about it. And I'm excited to be here today, and I am so happy to see you guys and happy you guys could make it. Oh, and I am based in Denver. Sorry, maybe I should finish that part. I'm a regional admissions counselor, so I am based in Highlands Ranch specifically. So yep, I'm in Colorado all the time. I just recruit Colorado students and Northern New Mexico students.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
I can go. I'm Aspen Arnold. I am one of the regional admissions counselors for Michigan State University. I've been with MSU for about 4 years. I've been in higher ed for about 6. I have always worked for public out-of-state institutions and was an out-of-state student myself. So super passionate about the topic of out-of-state schools and just the opportunity to pursue leaving Colorado. So I originally grew up in Colorado and moved to Texas. So I'm based in Dallas, but get to come back to Colorado pretty frequently to see family and also to recruit students from across the state.
And I'm Christina Dicario. I am not a regional rep. I am coming to you from College of Charleston in South Carolina. I'm lucky enough to live there, although right now I am in Fort Collins, Colorado. But I have been at CFC for 12 years, and this will be 14 years in the admissions industry. I was previously at the University of Miami. So have a lot of public experience and a little bit of private experience as well. And I went to a public school, though I was an in-state student there. Well, Florida's big though, so you're still 7 hours away from home and in-state. So a little bit, I know what it's like to go away for college.
That's awesome. Thanks guys for your perspectives. So Keela and Marilyn, we're more than happy to answer your questions. We don't have a full-fledged formal presentation to put on today. We're going to kind of take a Q&A approach. We're obviously all have quite extensive experience with working with out-of-state students and just the affordability of it, as well as just what that student experience looks like. And so we're happy to give our spiels and to give you some tips and tricks, but we'd like to answer your questions if you have them. So we can start there.
Okay, so I have a loud house right now. Sorry. So I'm nervous about unmuting, but my questions are, my daughter is interested in several out-of-state schools, and a lot of the schools have been asking her diversity questions, and she is not, she's not of color or race. She's from a small town in Colorado. And so how does one go about answering those questions when they do not have that kind of a story to tell?
So is it like an essay or just kind of?
Yeah, like a supplementals.
I mean, you could go with the approach, she's in a state that is very white and, she is from a smaller area within that state. So, I mean, it may not need to be the experience that she's had, but maybe the experience she's looking for of like, I want to experience people from different cultures and meet them and expand my worldview. This is where I'm from. There's also, not every student is from a rural community. So that is a unique story in itself. Mm-hmm. And so she could use that also to kind of tell the story about who she is and what she's looking for.
Christina, that's where I went automatically, was to the rural community and the western slope of Colorado. For us at Michigan State, this is not our primary recruitment territory necessarily. And so speaking to students that have maybe geographically are more diverse, that's a huge selling point for us. And so I think that you'll see that trend in other institutions as well, is that geographic, and again, that's maybe not like a beautiful, pretty essay topic to write about. Is well, I'm from this area that other people aren't from, but again, I think it does show some diversity, and that is what our schools are looking for. Yes, there is pushes from each of our institutions and leadership for cultural and racial diversity, obviously, but geographic diversity is a huge part of what we're looking for as well. I think it's why all 3 of us are sitting on this panel, is we want students from the Western Slope. We want students that are going to come with a different perspective than, students from a big city, or, for us from Detroit or whatever that is. So I think she's in a good position there to kind of tweak it. And I would say don't get like caught in the anxiety of I didn't have that experience, right? I think that that's something that we get in the weeds of like, oh my gosh, they're only looking for diverse students. And I've heard that a lot when students are looking at like the Ivy Leagues or tier 2 Ivies, you know, those really competitive schools. Well, I'm not diverse, so I'm not going to be admissible. Like that's not necessarily the case. They're not comparing one student to another and that's the deciding factor. And so to kind of debunk that, I think is important.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, all of you, is that if she talks about like her school, when we were brainstorming together, like, oh, what should she write about? Her small school does a lot of ex-ed meaning learning in like the mountains and do like hikes and, using your body. So that kind of thing, like that's a really diverse type learning experience. Or jumping off cliffs into rivers kind of thing, or camping with their family. Are you saying that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's totally a unique story. And I think when, like Aspen said, when we think about diversity, a lot of times your mind goes just straight to a racial diversity perspective. But, rural students aren't really as represented as they should be. And I think that's a unique perspective in itself, especially like in the state of South Carolina. We have a lot of rural students. And so and we're luckily a small state, so we can always get out there. But with Colorado, it's hard to get out there. And so rural students, they tend to be a little bit underrepresented and not talked about as much, but it's a very, common experience across this is a big country and there's a lot of rural communities. So I think bringing that perspective to light and all the unique things that come with being a rural student, I mean, that's a perspective that you don't generally hear about that often because students feel like it's not unique, but like it is.
Yeah. So like our kids here in Colorado and Snowmass, they don't go shopping in malls, they go skiing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
And like, at least for South Carolina, like we don't know that.
I think of Jen, like Jen and I have, yeah, right. Jen and I both are like as land grant institutions, and I don't know if College of Charleston is, but I think we have a lot of similarities of initiatives for rural students. And oftentimes those are more centered towards our in-state students. Like you hear about those initiatives more. So I know for tech, again, living in Dallas, like we hear about their rural initiatives throughout the state. In Michigan, we have some great scholarships and great opportunities for rural students throughout the state of Michigan. That's still something that the admissions staff is looking for from other states. I just think, you guys it's not as advertised to out-of-state students, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, and honestly, like if she was applying to like a school in Texas, my gosh, that right there makes her diverse. If she's an out-of-state student, Texas is pretty new at the really seeking out-of-state students. So anybody out of state is diverse. They're from a different kind of background, a different, they didn't all grow up on ranches. They didn't all, come from cotton farmers and stuff. So I mean, that right there in and of itself makes them a diversity, or a part of a diverse group. So, which is exciting. I love that Texas is finally opening up to, more out-of-state people. So yeah, it's fairly new though for the state. And even like University of Texas right now, they can only have like a tiny fraction of out-of-state students, whereas I know us in A&M, we're starting to kind of branch out a little bit and have more out-of-state students. Like I know our college president, that he made it an initiative as far as like with our scholarship program, so that students can get in-state tuition because he wanted to grow the out-of-state numbers. So.
Well, that's great to know because I didn't think of that aspect of small town doing different stuff growing up kind of approach. Thank you.
That's my favorite. Do you guys get to read? I'm looking at Christina and Jen, like the essays about, and I went skiing, or we went on this X, Y, and Z backpacking trip. I mean, they're so fun because not all of our students have those experiences. So that's always a fun change to read about. And that's, me talking from a general essay standpoint. So I think it's pretty obvious. All of us are pretty approachable as well. And so if your daughter, not that she's looking at any of our schools. One, we're all more than happy to talk to her. And I think most admission staff are very approachable. And, you know, that's a great question to start the conversation with an admissions counselor. That's an intuitive question. It shows that they've done research, that your daughter's done research on that institution. It's not just asking, do you have X, Y, and Z major? And so that might really start the conversation with the admissions staff, which I think is all of our goals, is really to have relationships with the students that are applying to our institutions. Because once we know them, I mean, Jen's talked about some of the scholarships available at Tech. Sometimes students don't know about that, and we can only share that information once we're working with you. And in some instances, that's on a one-on-one basis. And so again, that reaching out, that's a great launching pad, is asking, hey, here's what I was thinking about this supplemental essay you have. What are your thoughts? Is this kind of hitting the mark? And I think most admission staff would be happy to answer that.
Yeah. And you should always have an assigned person. Like I read, you know, all of us read the Colorado applications. I'm assuming, Aspen, you read them too. Yeah. So we all read,
yeah. I'm not allowed to read my own students.
And you're there, so I knew you had them. So, you know, we're all like assigned, like if she was applying to any of our schools, we're all assigned to like be her advocate, be her like guide to this process. So every school is applied by territory, most of them do geographically. And so, you know, going on their website and finding like who my exact rep is, or even just calling the office or emailing the office and say, who's my rep? I go to this high school in this city, in this state.
And it's always a good idea to get to know us. I mean, because yes, like they were saying, that is exactly what we do, is we fight for them. If I have a student who says, I need help, I need a scholarship, you know, I can certainly go back and try to do what I can, you know, as far as giving the admissions committee that kind of information. I know they don't let me review my own students, but I'm a little biased. But yeah, I definitely read a lot of other applications and stuff. So, but it's, you know, we're there to help. We're there to help students get through this. And yeah, it's why we do this.
I have a couple more questions, but are there other parents who want to ask questions?
Keela's a student.
Or a student.
She's from Grand
Even
Junction
better.
High School. Yes.
Really listening.
And
Well,
did
go
I
ahead,
say your
Mary.
name? Is it Kayla or Keela? Did I say it right? I don't want to say it wrong.
It's Kayla.
Kayla. Okay. Sorry about that. I do
No, you're-
apologize.
It's all
Okay.
you, Marilyn.
Yep. It's all you. Go for it.
Well, I used to be a teacher, so I understand wanting to hear from a student.
There you go.
Kayla, do you want to say anything to them? This is pretty much a golden opportunity.
Well, I'm just listening.
Okay. Well, we're happy you're here today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're willing to listen to your supplemental essay questions. Okay. I lost my question. Okay, this is it. This is politically incorrect, but here's the question, since I have all of you. Is it attractive for out-of-state colleges to receive applications? I mean, is it attractive for your institutions to receive out-of-state applications that can pay full tuition?
It's a really hard question to answer.
And
so
should I rephrase that in a different way so it isn't?
No,
obnoxious?
I think that we can answer for our institutions like individually, because each of us review separately. When I'm reviewing, I cover the family income and don't look at it, because that should not affect the way that I'm reviewing a student file. And that's how I personally read. That's not necessarily how our entire office reads, but that's how I do. I don't know. I hope this is being recorded. Great. We're going to be in trouble with NAGAC and all the things. No. So I don't personally. It is something, I'll say this, like when it comes to looking at finances, I look at them once a student submits their FAFSA, and even if it's a student that would essentially doesn't qualify for any federal aid, they still may be eligible for additional scholarships for us. So there is some attractiveness, in my opinion. And again, this is like I'm giving you my not politically correct answer. But that there are some instances where a higher income family might be more qualified to get an additional $5,000 because I know that they can make it work. Whereas if I'm looking at a student that has a family income of $20,000, they're not going to be able to pay, even if I gave them an additional $5,000, they're not going to be able to afford a school that's, X, Y, and Z cost. And so I think in those regards, like that's why I always tell even high income families fill out the FAFSA, because it allows me to just have a better understanding of where you're at. And then we can start meeting you halfway. We might not give you, we're probably not going to give you a full ride scholarship, which we're not giving to anybody. But we might be able to kind of meet you in the middle that way. But as far as admissions criteria specifically for Michigan State, no, there's no advantage or disadvantage to a student based on their family's income.
And for us, I'm lucky in that I don't have to make any of those financial decisions. We actually have a separate department that does both scholarships and both our financial aid packages and stuff. So, and they're the ones that look at the FAFSA. So I can see those numbers, but I don't do anything with them, because for one, we really kind of like Aspen said, we don't have really full ride scholarships except for our National Merit Finalists. And National Merit Finalists, it is free everything. I mean, it's tuition, room, board, all of that kind of stuff. But those are really the only ones. And the need-based, we don't really have need-based scholarships. The need-based goes to the financial aid side. That's all FAFSA. It's all based on that. Whereas the scholarships, I mean, there's all kinds of different scholarships. There's merit scholarships, and those are at like a set level, but then we do have, since we are test optional, we've got merit scholarships then for those students based more on their grades and their essays and their actual application. Then there's like departmental essays, and they're looking for different things, so it all can vary like that. So I don't know if that helps.
And then for us, I don't see any income information when I'm reading the application. So we do offer need-based aid through the FAFSA. I always encourage students to fill it out. So even if you're not going to qualify, or, the previous student, I ask my financial aid office every year if filing a FAFSA can hurt if you're not eligible for need-based aid. And they say no. And I ask them every year, and I ask it during a recorded session. So I always say, just go ahead and file the FAFSA. There's a lot of scholarships sometimes that are need-based, that are based on you filing a FAFSA in general, is like step one to even be considered. But there's also this but there's a couple different ways that schools review whether they're need blind or need aware. And so occasionally, like my school doesn't do this. Are either of you need aware? So need blind is what we all are. And that means we don't see any financial aid information, whether they're applying for aid or whatever it is when we're making admission decisions. So the ability to pay has no bearing on the admission status. And then for us, we don't package scholarships in the admissions office. That all goes through the Office of Financial Aid as well. And so they're privy to the FAFSA information. I can't see FAFSA details on a student. I don't know what the EFC is. I don't know any of that. As we get down the line, I do sit on our scholarship appeals board. And so there we'll find out if the student has filed a FAFSA or not. But again, I'm not privy to that information. So I think if we're being honest, any school, anywhere would obviously a full pay is advantageous to the university, but it's not something that need blind schools consider in the admission process. But need aware schools would be looking at that. And that's a fair question to ask if you're blind or need aware as you're talking to your counselors.
I will say too, there's a statistic that came out 2 years ago that according to the Department of Education, 65% of all colleges in the country, not just tech, but all colleges in our country, 65% of us have scholarships that require the information from the FAFSA. And a lot of times because a lot of our scholarships come from donors, and those donors of course want that tax credit. And so they have to do the FAFSA. So, the students have to do the FAFSA so they can be considered for those scholarships, because otherwise those scholarships wouldn't be trackable. And apparently they need to be, the government wants to see where from point A to point B, where that money is going. So, there's all kinds of reasons. And I've had students who were well off, who I know I had one student a couple of years ago who filled out the FAFSA on October 1st, and her family was they had plenty of money, and she got $5,000 for grants. So not that she had to pay back. So there are definitely opportunities out there.
A couple helpful tools, and I don't know if I think for both of you, Kayla and Marilyn, each of us, every university in the country is going to have a net price calculator on our website. And I think that's a really helpful tool where you're looking. I know it takes a little bit of time, but you're going to input financial information from your family. And so you'll get a better sense of like maybe what you're expecting to pay out of pocket. Now, of course, there can be changes. It's not always, the final number. I explained paying for college is like you're shopping for a car, right? The sticker price is not necessarily what you're going to walk out of there with. And that's probably a great basis in general to explain out of state institutions is, you're looking at schools that cost $50,000, a year. But that doesn't mean that that's what it actually pays or costs each semester or each year. But yeah, that net price calculator is a really great starting point. And then I think most of us are pretty transparent when it comes to what scholarships are available. And so, definitely those websites, if that's something that you guys are talking about of, okay, well, who has these out of state scholarships? I explain it as don't start by like looking for schools that are affordable, look for schools that are the right fit for your student. And so, if Michigan State's the right fit, you find us and then you find the scholarships, right? Not the other way around, because you're going to be, there are going to be institutions that are the right fit that are also going to be the right fit financially. And I think that's an important differential to make.
Well said.
I think
It's interesting you say that because some college admissions officers say the opposite.
We want you to be happy and that's so funny. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah. I would never pick up a view book. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I would never pick up a view book and look at that number. You can see the in-state number, you can see the out-of-state number. Never assume that that is exactly what you're going to pay. I mean, because like I said, at Tech, if you get just $1,000 of any of our scholarships, then you get in-state tuition automatically, and all the scholarships come off the in-state tuition. So it would take you from like 25,000 down to 11,000 for the year. So I mean, there are all kinds, and we're not the only one. There are a lot of different schools that have different programs that can bring tuition down, way down, like some less than in-state schools. So
with net price, you always want to ask the admissions office or financial aid office if it's been updated for the year. If we are changing, like this year, we're changing how we do our scholarships completely. So right now, if you go on our net price calculator, it's going to spit out what you had gotten last year. So it is kind of good to go back and double check that, I did the net price, hasn't been updated for the year, can I rely a little bit on this data? And like Aspen said, it's not going to be exact. And there's a lot of, I think when you ever go to any net price calculator, there's a whole paragraph of disclaimers. But give you a good idea if it's been updated for the year on what you might be looking at.
I have a question for y'all that might be helpful, Marilyn. It seems like you're a great advocate for your daughter, obviously. So she's lucky to have you. But what is y'all's policies on your institutions of like coming back and talking about the financial aid package that's been offered? Is that something that you recommend doing? Is that something that you're like, nope, that's our final offer once we send you the package and scholarships? What does that look like on your campuses?
For us, if a student comes up, like I mentioned, if they just have 1,000 of a scholarship. So if I've got a student who really, really, really wants to come to Tech and they come back and say, I didn't get a merit scholarship, I haven't gotten a departmental scholarship, and I mean, our scholarships seriously are awarded throughout the year because we're never going to tell a donor, oh no, you keep it, you missed the deadline. We're just going to say, thank you. We're going to give that money to the students. But if they come back and let me know, I will keep my eyes out for, at least one of those maybe discretionary scholarships sometimes random money will come in. And, if I let our people know that I have a student who really wants to come to tech and just needs that $1,000 so they get the in-state, what can you do? Then it can help. So, I mean, in our case for scholarships, to get that in-state, it definitely can help. But I have nothing to do with need-based financial aid. That is all, they can certainly talk to financial aid. And especially if there is a situation like, with the pandemic, we had families who one parent maybe lost their job, maybe both parents lost their job. And so they were definitely reaching out to our financial aid department and saying, okay, here are my extenuating circumstances. My situation has changed, and being able to get additional help through financial aid. So sometimes it is definitely worth reaching out, to a school or to the financial aid or a set department that maybe handles that, to let them know that, they're experiencing hardship right now. So, sometimes there are different things that schools can do, at least at Tech.
For me, even in my personal life, I am of the opinion that you're not going to get a yes if you don't ask. So, we're not going to like haggle back and forth or negotiate like a car or a home buying process. But, we do have an appeal process for merit scholarships. We have an update process for the FAFSA since it's based on 2 years prior. And I always like to walk students through those options if it's for them. Typically, a merit scholarship appeal is going to be more successful if there's new academic information that wasn't available at the time of the decision. That might change where they fall. But when I'm talking to students about aid anyway, and this is where the relationship comes in, just like Jen said, where I can be like, oh, you're interested in marine biology. Well, actually, I don't know if you looked over here, but here's a little scholarship that you can apply for separately. And the key is to do that early, get to know us early. So we have a little bit of a confusing process where you are evaluated for like the bigger scholarships at admission time. And then there's a separate scholarship for like, there's a special application for specialty scholarships, service and leadership, anything based on a major, even though we don't admit to major. If you are going to be a school business student, there are scholarships that are for the students. Sometimes in the hub of all of the admissions process, we're one of many schools they're applying to. So I don't expect them to always be like Johnny on the spot with everything we're sending them. But when I know students and I see they haven't applied for the other ones, and I'm like, well, you're president of your community service club and you are a leader in all these other things and you do a ton of service, like this scholarship might be for you. Like you need to go after that one. So I think talking to us can always help. I'm just of the mind that, I'm an asker, not a guesser. So I'm always going to ask and I guess that the answer is no. That's just how I go through life. But I don't think you can get a yes if you don't ask. And what's the worst? They say like, no, that's the final thing. Okay.
We're pretty similar, Christina, with our process. So I was just curious, and we have those conversations definitely about, okay, what can we do? And especially as moving test optional, those are more conversations that we're seeing happen just to make sure that we're truly understanding the full student. And I know, again, that's something that we're doing with students that, MSU is their top choice. We want to make them make their offer affordable and make it a possibility. So just curious how other schools kind of process that.
Yeah.
Other questions?
We learn from each other on these things too.
Yeah.
Well, since you brought up test optional and how you make those decisions, how do you guys make the admissions decisions when there is no test submitted? It seemed to be such a weeder outer, and it helped you guys. I know that's not a word, weeder outer.
No, it just makes us actually look way more closely at the student. So it's a chance, make sure the students fill out their application and leave no blanks, make sure that they put information like under the different sections. I don't, like on the Common App, like there's a section for extracurricular activities, for volunteer work experience, for awards and honors and all that. So make sure that they make it as complete as possible. I usually tell my students if they are applying test optional, even though normally our essays and letters of recommendation are optional, and I know this is not the case for all schools, but I usually say, oh, if you're applying test optional, do an essay because we'll actually read it and we want to know more about you. We need to know, like, what are you bringing to the table as a student? Make sure you get it in a couple of letters of rec, because they can definitely give us more information. And I mean, I have actually had some students apply test optional and get better scholarships than they would have if they sent in their test scores. So, because we're looking more closely at the student itself and not just, you know, to see if they're a good student and not just a good test taker.
It was really easy for us to change to test optional. We've always valued grades more than test scores. And at least for us and the state that we're in, a lot of our students are first generation students. And testing is not something that they've been prepping for their whole life. You know, we have a lot of rural students and, you know, there's not this like college prep fervor out in like rural South Carolina. So they're not always getting those resources to make sure that they're going to get the test score they need. So we've always looked at grades first. And for me, tests were always this extra complicating data point of like, this is an A student. They're number 3 in their class. They're incredible. They have an 850. It's just testing is not their thing. And we have so much academic support on campus that when students are not great testers, that's always been fine. In our research, there was a certain GPA for our in-state students that over that GPA, it literally did not matter what their test score was for success at the institution. So for us, it was super easy to change. Like Jen said, those essays become a little more important. The extracurriculars become a little more important. You want to make sure this process, I think with any school, is as holistic as you want it to be. So if you're applying to a school that doesn't require essays, doesn't require extracurricular lists, and doesn't require tests, if you want them to be making that decision just on your transcript, that is fully in your prerogative. If you want them to consider your entire story, then you got to put all of that in the application, and the apps are set up for that. And then getting in touch with us works too, because we get to know you outside of what you've written on the piece of paper. Letters of rec help. Those are sometimes hard with schools that have a lot of students per counselor, but you know, if you can get a genuine good rec letter from someone at the school, great. But yeah, it was actually really easy for us. It was surprisingly easy to change.
And it usually doesn't hurt a student. And I think that's like a very important point to walk away with, is that applying test optional does not hurt you. I've been talking to a lot of high school counselors this week, and that's something that they're continuing to have conversations with their students and parents about is, well, we always thought that, you know, that's going to make a admissions counselor assume that that student is a bad test taker, or and that's not the case, right? Like there are some students that just they felt like their application stands out on its own and they didn't need to submit that test. And so for me, there's no disadvantage. We saw a pretty even split. I think we had about 60% of our applicants apply test optional, about 40% apply with test scores. And so those are numbers that we're all starting to gather. I think slowly. I can speak for Michigan State in particular, like our numbers and statistics are coming out slowly about what our test optional applicant pool looked like. But again, not going to hurt you. Christina brought up the academic profile, and I just want to point out, like for us in particular, that's going to be a huge point, is that transcript. I'm going to look a little bit harder at did they take any upper level courses if that high school offered them? So AP, IB, dual enrollment. I know there's a lot of dual enrollment like options in Colorado and on the Western Slope. So those are things that we're going to look at. Grade trends are going to be important. But again, it's not going to hurt a student in any way if they don't submit a test score. The scholarship component is a really important question to ask. The majority of schools that I've at least sat on panels with over the last year and a half are test optional for scholarships as well, if they are for admissions purposes. But in some cases, that's not necessarily true. And so make sure that you're asking, like, what does that test optional policy look like on your institution? Are you test optional for the honors college? Are you test optional for scholarships? Because you want to make sure that if you're applying test optional, that you still have those same opportunities. I always recommend, so like at Michigan State, I always recommend test optional students follow up with me once they get their scholarships, just so that we can make sure that they didn't leave anything on the table, because it is still a holistic review process then for our scholarship committee. And sometimes the scholarship committee doesn't know what Aspen High School offers in terms of AP courses. Maybe they didn't offer any AP courses, so they didn't offer them a higher scholarship. Well, I know that they don't offer, whatever. This is a terrible example because I know that they have AP classes, but anyway, you're following it, right? So I understand the school's profile, so I can then go back and advocate. But again, I can't advocate for every single of the thousands of students that I'm reviewing. But if a student reaches out, then heck yeah, I'm going to go back and look at their profile and go to that scholarship committee and be like, hey, this didn't quite add up based on what I know about this school and where the student is coming from. So again, getting to know us, communicating is really important.
And like with us, if a student applies test optional and, then they go through, they may get a scholarship or something. And if they change their mind, like say maybe they didn't get as much, or they can actually look at our chart for our merit scholarships and know exactly what they're going to get if they did send in their test score. So they could change their mind and send in their test score, to get that bigger scholarship. We want to give them whichever is bigger. So if sometimes they'll get a bigger one, and they can look at that sheet and they can see. I mean, a specific example, I had a student who had a 1240 on their SAT, top 15% of his class. Looking at our chart, he knew he would get 2,000, but he applied test optional initially. He actually got 4,000. So it was definitely in his best interest to at least try that. If we'd only given him maybe $1,000, that is at bond, when he was first applying, if maybe we'd only given him 1,000, he knew he could send in that test score. We would have reevaluated and given him the 2,000 from the chart. So, we want to give them the most that they've earned, but he was a really good student and he had done a lot of extracurriculars, a lot of volunteer work, which colleges seem to love. So, so we were actually able to give him more test optional, but yeah, they can send in new test scores, new transcripts, like Christina said, new information all the way up until May 1st at Tech, and we would just reevaluate for scholarship purposes.
I think we have like 5 minutes left. Am I right on this timing? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. If either of y'all have any additional questions, I think we're, again, more than happy to answer them for the next few minutes. I just wanted to make sure we're on track.
Marilyn, you got a private set.
I know. I feel like this was great.
Yeah.
It is kind of funny, right?
And it's good that you got 3 perspectives, because every school does things like a little bit different, and we know that's annoying. And we feel like every high school is a little bit different, or very different. And so we are always here, like I can't stress this enough, we're always here to help students through the process. Every panel I do, I always say, like, even if you're not looking at College of Charleston and you just want a perspective or you just want something, and I'm sure these ladies feel the same way, we work for our institutions, but we also work for, students and want to give them all the advice that they need, even if it's not for our school. So I would say if you all have questions after this, like, don't hesitate to reach out, even if it's not about, Michigan State or Texas Tech or College of Charleston. Like, we're just here to help with this whole process, which is overwhelming.
Yeah, and we don't compete, so it doesn't hurt our feelings. Like if you got questions on a different school, I mean, we don't compete. The bottom line is we just want the students in college, the college that's the right fit for them. We want them to be happy. So, if they tell me that they're applying such and such and such, but not my school, I'm still more than happy to help. I've helped students, I've read their essays, I've helped them, fill out their applications and everything. So, I mean, we like to be seen as resources, and we consider ourselves resources for students, right, even if you're not applying to our universities. So we're there to help.
I have a question then. When you're reading the major application essay, like not the supplementals, but the major ones, students are often coached to write just a very artistic story about an event in their life or something, but it's often like not meaningful. You know what I'm saying? Not a huge event. And I'm a career consultant, so I find that really odd, because when you're hiring to bring someone into the firm, you want to see how they would best fit in the firm. So it's better to portray yourself like, I did this activity because I'm interested in this, and this is why I'm interested in your school. That would be my train of thought when I'm reading. And there's many college counselors who say, oh, no, do the creative story. What's your take on that?
I think do the creative story if you're a creative story writing student.
Right.
If you are not, you need to be true to yourself because you're going to be there for the next 4 years. So, you want to make sure that you're just presenting yourself.
Right.
Because I don't need to find every student who's going to be pretend to be everything they think we want them to be well-rounded students. Like, I'm not looking for 2,400 well-rounded students for my freshman class. I'm making a well-rounded class. So I want the artistic students. I want the sports students. I want the musicians. I want the leaders, the service-minded students. I want all of those different types of personalities, and we will make the class be diverse and interesting and full of different personalities. But I think students do themselves a disservice when they write something that isn't genuine to them. They got to be themselves.
The student voice thing, and that's where I would kind of go with that, is hearing the student's voice. I mean, I like joke about, I don't mind if a student's using a 4-letter cuss word in their essay. Like, this is not an English paper, right? Like, this is meant to really show who you are as a person, and kind of your first time of showing yourself as an adult and what you're wanting to look for, like at that next level. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a reflection of what you've been for the last 18 years of your life. It's, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Here's where I'm going. And so my gut tells me, and I've never been on the high school side, but my gut tells me that part of the reason that those counselors are saying that is that students are applying to 10, 15 schools. And so the idea of rewriting 15 essays about why I want to go to that individual school, that sounds like a nightmare, right? And then those counselors are going to have to review them and edit them. And so you want something that's a little bit more general, right? That is going to be applicable. So I'm again, I don't need to read a story that's like, thank you, this is why I like Michigan State. It's cool. I want to know who you're going to be and more about you rather than like my institution. I think that's where students get a little bit confused. Is they start telling the story and then we're like, this was really interesting. I did want to keep reading and know where you were going. I learned nothing about you, right? And so there's that balance. And again, most 17-year-olds, nothing traumatic has happened in their lives. We're very, very fortunate that we work with students that maybe haven't gone through trauma or don't have this like really diverse experience, and that's okay. It's again, figuring out how to use your voice and paint the picture of like what you're going to do at that institution or who you are.
But it is important, I would say, if a student has had a traumatic experience, or maybe they've had a bad semester or even a bad year, use those essays to talk about that. I mean, because we actually do read those essays and we do take that stuff into consideration. I mean, I had one student, when they applied, he had been bullied so badly his freshman year that his freshman GPA was 0.9%. But and his grades were coming up, we could see that. And he had switched schools, started at like an anti-bullying club, wrote about all this in his essay, but he'd been in and out of hospitals, suicidal, just horrible, horrible things. But we took a chance, and based on his essay, we admitted him, and he graduated 2 Mays ago with a 4.0. So we know that we know that those experiences do not define them as students. And so those essays are their tools for, situations like that as well. So use those.
And the important thing is there's not one thing that's going to make or break the essay, the admission. Your essay is not going to tank your entire process. Your test score is not going to tank your entire process. It's not one thing. We're looking at lots of different things. And I would say, like, if I pretended to be everything that students wanted us to be, I would have really unhappy enrolled students. And so we also have to be really genuine to our institution. And that's what we want from the students, because, we want a well-rounded class, and we want all types of students there. We just want them to be themselves, because, you're going to be on campus all 4 years, do your thing. We want you to just do your thing here.
Yep. And it's their home for the next 4 years. So we definitely want them happy.
Well, I'm super honored that you guys answered all my questions. And Kayla, I'm sorry you didn't speak up.
Well, we appreciate
I hope you learned a lot.
Yeah. And I know Christina and I dropped our information in the chat. I don't know if Jen, you had a chance to do that, but seriously, we're very honest. We're more than happy to answer any questions you have throughout the process. Obviously, if your daughter's looking at any of our institutions or even our peer institutions, we may know who to get you in contact with. So feel free to shoot us an email. I think we'll let you have your next 13 minutes before the college fair starts. So go get water, bathroom breaks,
Yeah,
etc. But awesome.
Have a great and productive day. Thank you all very
And
much.
thanks, you guys,
Yeah,
and
you're
thanks
so
for being
welcome.
here.
Thanks
And
for
thanks,
coming.
Kayla. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Kayla.
See you
Bye,
soon.
Bye.
That was great,
Okay.
you guys. Yeah, we'll
That
see. I'll
worked.
see you at 1. Oh, no, 2. Is it 1? No, I'll see you at 1.
One. It better be at
1.
1 because I would like to be out of here for the Broncos game. So if we can try to
Okay.
speed things up, that